What we're going to do is start off. Sam Harris had, when we first talked about doing this meeting, Sam said, given last year's exposure and so on, that he'd be quite happy not to speak and to let everybody else speak, since it would not be any claims then that he was opining too much. And in fact, he's been remarkably quiet. But I think on this last day, it's only appropriate that he actually have a chance to say something, since he's got some thoughts that have evolved during the first 2 days. Sam is, of course, the author of the New York Times bestsellers The End of Faith and Letter to a Christian Nation. He's a graduate in philosophy from Stanford University, I believe, studying with Dick Rorty, the late Richard Rorty, who was going to come to this meeting last year, but sadly was claimed by pancreatic cancer. And Sam is, well, it says here completing a doctorate in neuroscience. But I talked to Marco Iacoboni last night, and I'm not sure how long that's going to take. So. Sam Harris.
Thank you, Roger. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be here with all of you. Dan Dennett and I were at a meeting of atheists, an atheist convention actually, about a month ago. And I had the good sense at that meeting to stand up in front of 500 of the most committed atheists in the country and say that atheism as a philosophy was bankrupt and as a word was disastrous, and we should not use the term. This had more or less the effect that any social scientist in this room could have warned me about. I think this was the only talk I had ever been to that began with a standing ovation and ended with some scarcely mammalian sounds of disgruntlement. Incidentally, Dan's talk began with a standing ovation and ended with one, and I noticed that that conduces to a better mood later in the evening. Anyway, Roger asked me to briefly summarize my misgivings with the concept of atheism and also talk a little bit about what my experience has been since our last meeting, as I have spent much of that time spreading joy to the world by publicly criticizing religion. My concern with the use of the term atheism, and here I'm going to echo something that Michael Shermer said, is that it invites a variety of misunderstandings, and it's philosophically really without content. I mean, we don't need a word like atheist. In the same way, we don't need a word for somebody who's not an astrologer. And we simply do not call people non-astrologers. And I don't think we would be tempted to if astrology suddenly became ascendant in our society. All we need are words like reason and evidence and common sense and bullshit to put astrologers in their place. And so it could be with religion. Now, my point with the term atheism, or really any label, naturalist, skeptic, humanist, secular humanist, bright, is that it invites misunderstandings and unnecessarily trims down our constituency. Because the truth is, on any specific question, a majority of people, even in America, functionally reject religious thinking. I mean, you take a question like, and this is from sexual ethics to medical research, you take something like embryonic stem cell research. A majority of Americans already reject the authority of religion on this subject. And so most people, many more people than would ever answer to the name of atheist, see on any specific question that there is a conflict between science and religion. I'm sure many of you in this audience are functionally atheists, and yet would never dream of going to an atheist conference or blogging on an atheist website. So it seems to me that if we want to encourage public displays of rationality, rallying people to the banner of atheism, or any banner that suggests that we are a maligned and marginal and cranky interest group, is a bad strategy. Now, the concept of atheism and this designation of the new atheist that is following many of us around like our shadows has confused, I think, even the scientific discussion of religion. I think much of that confusion has been in evidence at this conference. It's in evidence in a debate that we're having online right now. Thomas Nagel is saying what many people at this conference have said, that there is no there's nothing about science that entails a criticism of religion. And there's nothing about science that entails a commitment to atheism. This, I think, is to be misled by words like religion and atheism. I mean, science clearly does not entail that one identify oneself as an atheist or even think of oneself as an atheist. But science does entail that one be skeptical of unsupported and unsupportable claims about miracles and about the divine origin of certain books. And when you dig into the details, this is all atheism is. Atheism is the failure to be convinced by other people's claims about miracles. And it is the conviction that they too should not be convinced. I mean, is there a conflict between justified and unjustified belief? I mean, this is really where we can see that there's a zero-sum game here between religion and science, because both religion and science are ways of forming beliefs, or ways of, they are systems of belief and their justification, or lack thereof. And unfortunately, they are systems that require very different standards of evidence and levels of self-criticism. And therefore, any comparison between religion and science is bound to be invidious. I mean, another problem, another way in which this entanglement is unavoidable between religion and science is that you can't disentangle religious and scientific truth claims. The belief that Jesus was born of a virgin is one of the key doctrines of Christianity. It is also a claim about biology. The belief that he will return to earth at some point in the future to judge the world entails a variety of claims about history, about the human survival of death, and apparently about the mechanics of human flight without the aid of technology. There's of necessity conflict between religion and science here. Now people like Deirdre McCluskey have alleged that the atheist criticism of religion always focuses on the most benighted and marginal and Bible-thumping nitwit version of the faith. And there's a far more sophisticated faith on offer that is untouched by this criticism. It's just not true. I mean, this criticism applies every bit as much to a sophisticated believer like Francis Collins. In fact, more so, because he should know better. He should know that if a frozen waterfall can testify to the divinity of Jesus, anything can testify to anything. Now, so whatever the subject under discussion, there are good reasons for believing things, and there are bad reasons. And the problem here is that religion has made bad reasoning into an art form.